Hey everybody, my name is Kendall Fuller, and I want to talk about the link between poverty and poor health. First, I want to look at this through the link as it pertains specifically to poor diet and poor dietary choices. And there are two specific reasons for that. One is the budget disparity. So, with a higher income household, the total budget percentage that is spent on food tends to be around 8%, whereas with a low income household, that percentage of their income and budget that they spend on food tends to go as high as like 31, 32%. And what this means is basically these lower income households, they can't exactly move things around, to afford more healthy options that might be more luxurious. They can't afford to shop at Whole Foods, at a Trader Joe's, at a Publix where the prices are a little more expensive. Just because their budget is so tight as it pertains to food that they've got to be able to just afford what they can afford, which might just be a few things at that convenience store, some unhealthy frozen meals at Kroger, that kind of thing. And then the second idea is this idea of food swamps and food deserts, actually. So a food desert is a more familiar term. It suggests that a food desert has a limited access to nutritious food, whereas a swamp, and I had never heard of a food swamp until this research. Food swamps are oversaturated with fast food, and these kind of go hand in hand. So it'll be a place, like I said, they don't have a Whole Foods, they don't have but maybe one good grocery store, and this wide range, this wide radius of housing. But they have a lot of McDonald's, a lot of Rallies, Wendy's, and they have a lot of liquor stores. And that physical side, as it pertains to poverty and like food choice, the more literal aspect, that can be a little obvious. So I also want to talk about how poverty can affect mental health. And pretty simply put, the worst aspect of this is just the constant worry and anticipation of economic shock that comes with living under poverty. You just live under constant anxiety and stress, basically, when you have to worry about, are you going to have enough to cover bills at the end of this month? Am I going to be able to feed my kids all month? Am I at risk of getting laid off from this job at the end of this month? All of that stuff just, it causes you to live under constant stress. And that is terrible for your body, to just live in a constant state of stress and anxiety. And then just to look at some pure statistics on the matter, individuals with low incomes are consistently found to be 1.5 to 3 times more likely to experience depression or anxiety. Another study stated that in the United States, adults over 26 are nearly twice as likely to have a serious mental illness compared to those at or above the poverty line. And then to look more at the physical side as opposed to mental, individuals in the poorest wealth quartet in this country have a 40% higher death rate than those in the wealthiest quartet. And also, adults aged 45 to 64 who live in poverty are more than twice as likely to have 2 or more chronic diseases such as hypertension, heart disease, diabetes. And then why is this important? For me, it's really the human element and just understanding that healthy eating and living isn't always feasible for those in poverty. In fact, it often is not feasible. I feel like we think a lot about healthy eating as like just a choice, to just make better dietary decisions. When you're impoverished, that often isn't an option. And also just the way poverty affects every aspect of your life. As we talked, it affects your mental health negatively. It affects where you live. And when you're living in a poverty-stricken place, often you don't have many resources. And when you have a lack of resources, it's even harder to escape that poverty. And, if that's not enough for some people, it does affect all of us in some ways, like ER visits. When people are more poverty-stricken and sicker, that usually means more trips to the ER, which takes up beds. That strains our medical system. And when ERs are crowded, that affects us all. And also the link between poverty, poor mental health, and crime. That it's a cyclical thing: poverty, poor mental health, and then crime in these underdeveloped and poverty-stricken communities. And when our communities are crime-ridden and less safe, that obviously affects us all. And for my references, I got all of my images for the project from unsplash.com. And the information I pulled from these great articles by Kate M. Shaw, Peter Cunningham, Barbara A. Lariah, and Matthew Ridley. Yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for watching and listening.